looking back at my life, what do I want to see? What was important in my life? What wasn't important? You often get consumed in, like, I need to be more successful. I need to make more money. I need to work harder. But how many times have you heard someone in their later years looking back and saying, oh, I wish I had worked harder? No, I wish I had spent more time with family, with friends, connecting, doing the things that I love.
Staying motivated takes work. If you don't work on your motivation, you become unmotivated. Join Umar Jang as he shares inspirational stories and tips to get you motivated to do whatever you need to do. This is the Motivational Voice Podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Motivational Voice Podcast. This is session number 34. Happy New Year, by the way. May this new year bring you joy, prosperity, and health, and may you find the strength and courage to go after your dreams. There will come a time in your life when being successful will be the number one focus in your life. And during that time, you might find yourself consumed by your work because you're climbing the corporate ladder, you're creating and growing your business, you're working long hours and trying very hard to nail the career and business goals you set out to achieve. If that's the case, perhaps you've come to realize that your personal life is starting to be seriously impacted by your high achiever mindset. You know it's a problem, but you don't quite know what to do about it. This, my friend, is the topic of today's discussion. My guest, Lisha Davidovits, is a success coach who works with high-achieving millennials on various topics related to life transitions, achievements, success, mindset, to name a few. In today's interview, we talk about how our ambitious pursuit can affect our personal life, and we also talk about what we can do to strike a balance between the two. Let's jump right into my conversation with Lisha. Lisha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. Thanks for coming on. Could you take a second and just introduce yourself to our listeners and let us know what you do and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Lisha, and I am a success coach for high-achieving millennials. And I love working with individuals who are at points of transition in their lives. So they're stepping into something new and different. They have a history of success, but this is kind of shaking them on their foundation a bit. They're, maybe getting married or moving in with someone, becoming new parents, stepping into a more senior role within their company, something that is important and is waking them up in the middle of the night or causing them stress and anxiety, and they're wanting to really have that success that they're used to. And so I support them in that journey and navigating the challenges, the uncertainties, and helping to set them up for even greater success than they otherwise would have in ways that are supportive and dynamic. And I also incorporate mental fitness. So it's not just the coaching, but it's helping them to overcome limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, things like that, to bring out their creativity, positivity, laser focus, and, just best, most powerful, awesome selves.
And when you say high achieving millennials, how do you define that?
So a high achiever, which I, feel like I fit into that category, is someone who's really ambitious. They've got this drive to do things that are important, and that they're self-motivated to really go after it hard and with enthusiasm and passion, determination. And so there's something that they aspire to, and the flame is there. High achievers have a flame that's, almost consistently there. And sometimes it's spanned and it becomes bigger, but they're just really driven to succeed, to push themselves, to challenge themselves, to take on those challenges. And those are gifts that people have. At times, though, it becomes hard when they're doing something that all of a sudden creates some uncertainty. And so then there's a fear of failure. So when it's love for achieving, that's when it's at its brightest. When there's fear of failing because they want so much to succeed, they're used to succeeding, that's when they start to get stuck and to start to avoid or to get tripped up on themselves or to distract themselves with other things because they're avoiding this thing that is all of a sudden kind of daunting and scary. So it's people that just dream big, have big goals, big visions, and really go for it.
When I hear you say that, I can't help but think that there are people who are truly really hard on themselves, that take no less than success. You have this caricature that you see on TV shows where someone gets an A minus and they're bummed. And is there some aspect of people maybe being too hard on themselves and having an unrealistic expectation as to what it means to really be performing at your tip-top level, and what that can do to your confidence and your personality overall?
Yeah, absolutely. It has huge repercussions. And this is something that I find very relatable for me. In my life, I would just, go for these big goals and push myself because I wanted to make sure that I was successful. And it even, started when I was in elementary school and wanting to get first place in the science fair and making sure everything was perfect. I also have a perfectionist side. So I was this high achiever having these high goals, and it needed to be just right. Otherwise, I was going to compromise my chances for success. So there's tremendous pressure, and that does have repercussions because for one's health, for one's clarity and thought, people will often think, well, the harder that I work, the more likely I am to succeed. And that's actually a lie, because when we're working hard, then we're burning ourselves out and we're compromising our ability to think with clarity, with openness. Yeah, we can still be really successful, but imagine how much more successful one would be when you're just in that flow and doing what you love and being able to let go of some of that perfectionism, some of that self-imposed pressure. And even more so, you're able to enjoy those successes even more. So many times high achievers, and myself included, I'll do something and it's like, okay, great, did that. I just got certified. Great, on to the next thing. I don't even take time to celebrate. Wow, I just did that. It's like, nope, check the box, success. Now we're on to the next success, on to the next challenge. So I'm not even enjoying and being in that pocket of what I did to savor that. So then you have these high achievers that aren't appreciating it, feeling like it's never enough because they're never giving themselves the satisfaction, allowing them to soak it up and to embrace what they have accomplished. And high achievers too, I found this a lot when I was working with managers. They would have this high achieving. And so it's all about climbing the social ladder, climbing the corporate ladder, not social, but corporate ladder. And I had this as well when I was working. I thought, okay, I'm a high achiever. I want to get to the top. So that means that I need to climb this corporate ladder. And I started realizing, you know what, that's not really what I want. And it was very enlightening working with these managers and seeing they made it to management. To them, that was a win. And then they realized, wait a minute, I don't want to be a manager.
Many of us go through life and feel like there's a certain degree of achievement, of success that we need to achieve. And you yourself talked about being guilty of being a high achiever and to a certain degree a perfectionist. Did you have a specific experience in your life where something didn't go quite as planned, and how did you adapt to that situation?
Yeah. So, in life, there have been many cases where things haven't gone as planned, like especially when it comes to job searching, looking for a specific role, then, we don't get that opportunity, or, relationships, things don't go as we would have liked. And what's beautiful about that, though, is that, in my life, I started to become more and more aware that with each situation, there were these gifts or opportunities that came about as a result of things not working out. And the first time that I learned that, I really realized that was probably around high school. So being a high achiever, throughout school, I tended to get what I wanted, and I tended to do well with my grades. So I had a track record for success. And so for the first times that I wasn't getting what I wanted as far as like certain grades or getting a certain role in, like, there was a color guard audition, and I ended up not making it onto the team. And so there was disappointment there. And then with jobs later on, there was that disappointment. And I'm like, wait, what is this? Like, I thought I had it in me. If I want something, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to make it happen. And, what's happening here? And so that was a big setback for me, having that track record. And that happens with a lot of individuals where they have this record for success. All of a sudden, there's like this rejection or this failure. And so it either gets them down where they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm depressed now. Or in my case, there was that gift of eventually realizing, you know what? I can use this as an opportunity to gain knowledge, to gain awareness, to have more empathy for myself, to be inspired, to explore what do I need to learn in order to make things different, to look at if this wasn't right for me, can I go back and find out what was it that made me not right for this position or for this opportunity, and learn. So there were gifts in that learning of what I could glean from those experiences, learning about myself and relationships as far as like, oh, I thought this person was right for me and then they broke up with me. This is terrible. Like, no, it's thinking about, well, you know what, actually, I was, in being this high achiever and a pleaser, I was pushing myself to be more of who I thought they wanted me to be, who they want in a partner, and wasn't being my authentic self, and made me realize, what, they saw that. They saw there was that disconnect as much as I was trying to fit this mold. And so there were so many of those experiences that made me realize oftentimes, for the sake of achieving, I was actually making myself someone other than my authentic self. I was trying to be someone that I wasn't truly authentically because I just wanted that thing. And then I noticed too, there were opportunities I was going after, such as color guard, where once actually I auditioned again and I got the opportunity and I was like, yes, I got it. And then once that excitement wore off, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even know if I really want this. I'm going to have to like show up all of these times and do all of this. And this is what it entails. Or even jobs too, where I'm like, I don't even know that I really wanted that. I was going after things just for that kind of dopamine hit of like, yes, I got it. I achieved. So that can become like a drug, that drive to achieve. And then when we don't get it, it can either get us down or drive us for learning. And in my case, it also drove me to be more introspective, to really look at, what am I doing? What's the price that I'm paying for achieving? And how am I not honoring my authenticity? How am I trying to conform just so I can have even greater sense of achievement with things that don't even matter as much to me as they should?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think in society in general, we already have those social pressures, whether it's peer pressure or just keeping up with the Joneses, or trying to go for maybe a goal that necessarily doesn't fulfill you, because you think that when you achieve that means success, and success means happiness, which doesn't necessarily equate. I think that's a very good example. This topic is so interesting that we're talking about it a lot longer than I expected, which is great. I may have to have you come back at some point in the future so we can dig deeper into your other expertise, because I think it's really interesting and it's really apropos for my audience and people listening. What I wanted to ask you about was, I know we've had a rough year, rough 2020 to say the least. How do people start with a clean slate? What are some of the things that people can do to just have a better year, or maybe start with a clean slate and feel like they are actually doing something that matters to them?
Yeah. One of the biggest things is to stop judging. Stop judging situations, stop judging others, what they're doing, what they're not doing. Stop judging ourselves about how we're parenting with our kids still at home and with not being able to go back to work. I think there's just been so much judgment, especially of circumstances. Oh, COVID is terrible. It's ruining my life. It's making this happen. It's making that happen. It's causing so much drama. We get pulled into that, and that pulls us down. And then it starts to bring in more negativity into our lives because we're irritated. And then if we're holding on to this irritated, kind of physicality and emotion, then we're negative towards others in our lives, in relationships. So then you have more relationship challenges. And, then there's this trickle effect, and then there's guilt and there's shame. And so I would say, just stop judging and stop waiting for things will get better when there's a vaccine. No. Why wait until that happens? That's judging the situation as this is bad and it can only be better when this happens, when that happens. So many times people say, well, I'll be happy when I can afford to buy a house. I'll be happy when I can have a child. And then they get that. And then it's like, well, now I'll be happy when this happens. And they're always like reaching for what the next thing is rather than being happy for what they have now. There's so much talk about gratitude journals and gratitude mindset and all of that. And that's important to the extent where it brings us to the present, to what's here, not what happened yesterday, not what's happening tomorrow, but what's right here. And when we ground ourselves in what's right here, we're actually engaging a different part of the brain. It's the sage part of the brain that has access to more positivity, more empathy, more patience, more curiosity. So instead of judging and saying, oh, this is so frustrating, then engaging that other region of the brain helps us say instead, I'm noticing some frustration coming up. What is that about? Okay, there's a value there as part of, being like emotionally agile, of saying like, I'm feeling this, what's going on, getting curious around it, saying there's a need that's not being met, there's a value that's not being honored, and then tapping into that. And when we learn how to do that and we're mindful about practicing that, of feeling like, oh, I'm getting like worked up emotionally, my energy is a little bit tight, and intercepting that by saying, okay, I'm going to do some deep breathing, take a moment to just focus on one sensation, which quiets that mental chatter in our minds, we're able to kind of come into that present moment and say, what's here? What are the gifts or opportunities with this challenge? What matters? What doesn't matter? And in that case, we can go forward with much better experiences in 2021. So it's really about not just what we're doing, what we're not doing, it's who we're being, who we're choosing to be, who we're choosing to not be, what we're saying yes to, what we're saying no to.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there that you mentioned. I think one was stop judging, and you mentioned stop judging the situation. And my mind went to stop judging the situation. Is there also an aspect of stop judging people, or is that separate?
Yeah, so we all have that inner judge that, says the situation is bad, or, oh, that person is so rude, or, now with the masks on, how could that person be wearing a mask? How could they not be wearing a mask? And so it's judging others and judging ourselves of like, oh, how could I have flubbed that meeting? Oh my gosh, I yelled at my kids. I'm such a terrible parent. So it's that judge that has the three different tiers: judge of others, judge of self, and judge of situations. And an example for me were, especially in the pandemic, it's kind of like the pandemic can be our mental fitness trainer. So I've had even more opportunities where the judge has come up where it's like, oh my gosh, this house is a mess again. We're all under one roof. There's so much more activity time here. So I'm like, this house is a mess. And I feel hijacked because I've got that stickler side, that perfectionist. I like things neat and tidy, everything in its place. And so I'm like, oh, there's the judge saying the situation is bad. And now I feel negative towards those that have caused it, towards my children. And so then if I take it out on them, then it causes, disruptions in the relationship. It makes them feel bad. So I have learned by strengthening that mental muscle to intercept it and to be like, okay, I'm noticing this. I'm going to do some repetitions on one sense. So sometimes it can be just like using my hand and going like this with my eyes closed, just feeling my fingertips and the palm of my hand, only focusing on that sensation. And it just quiets the mind. It quiets the energy. There are a lot you can do visual repetitions like that. And it's almost like a portal to meditation without having to like go to your meditation space for 20 minutes and meditate. You can just be like, okay, I'm going to rub my fingertips together for 10 seconds. 3 breaths is all it takes. And that really, really helps to calm things and to be more open and flexible. And so then instead, I will go to the kids and I'll say, hey guys, I'm noticing that there is just a big mess everywhere. What can we do about this? What are some ideas? Let's explore together. So I come to them with like, curiosity, a willingness to explore rather than criticizing or condemning them, which just, causes so much damage in our own emotions and in the relationships and in overall happiness.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. When you're talking about the mindfulness aspect of it, which is that really rung true, not only for me, but for what I see in many people, that we tend to just push through. Things get harder, we push through because that's what people are telling us. That's what even quotes, if you're going through hell, keep going, don't stop, that kind of thing. And I think sometimes, to your point, you just need to stop and be mindful and say, why am I feeling this way? Why is it feeling like I'm getting worse and worse, whether it's physical or emotional? Mm-hmm. Just be mindful and start paying attention to those. When I did this happened and made this worse. Or I think that's a very good point. And people sometimes don't have the skill or don't even know that you can stop, even if it's in the middle of a fight or a rough situation, or you're frustrated by your children, to just stop and take a step back. And quite often being quiet, to your point, for just 10 seconds can make a world of difference, because you ask yourself, wait a minute, what am I doing right now? Why am I so aggravated? Yeah, that's a very good point. And another thing you mentioned, which was finding a way to ground yourself. You were touching your palm, something tactile, whether it's touching your hand, or personally, I like to think of, when I was going through tough times, I spent time in a refugee camp. One thing that worked very well for me was to use what I came to name anchor memories, which is, I think of a sensation that is tied to a very strong emotion that could be a memory from my past that I had. So something that made me feel good, spending time with my dad when I was a kid, and then bring that to the present. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that because I think that was a very good point, and that's very important.
Memories are really powerful. And you can also, in addition to using memories and to using touch, you can also use sight, looking at, a tree with such exquisite attention that you notice things that you've never noticed before, shades of color and texture, or listening to the farthest away sound and then listening to the closest sound. Even with food, a lot of people, do this, mealtime can be stressful. So just closing your eyes to block out other sensory experiences and just focusing on the taste and texture of the food. As a side note, it works really well for people that are trying to manage how much they eat, because they're getting that much more out of each bite. And because they're quieting that stress, then they're no longer eating out of stress if that's the case. So it's actually helping to calm them. So there's less of a need to eat as much, and they're getting more joy out of the food and out of the companionship that they have if they're with others.
Great. Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't think about that, but yeah, even food, because it touches the senses. That's a very good point.
Yeah, so hands, brushing teeth, anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So stop judging. What would be something else that people might want to consider doing to just, again, ground themselves, or have just a better year, get a better grasp on things?
Yeah, a lot of times, like you said, we're just so busy and we're going without thinking, reflecting, processing. And so, a strong recommendation is to really think about, at the end of my life, looking back as my elder, wiser self, and I'm healthy of mind and body, looking back at my life, what do I want to see? What was important in my life? What wasn't important? You often get consumed in I need to be more successful. I need to make more money. I need to work harder. But how many times have you heard someone in their later years looking back and saying, oh, I wish I had worked harder. No, I wish I had spent more time with family, with friends, connecting, doing the things that I love. So now's the time to look forward into your elder, wiser self, healthy of mind and body, and be able to consider, what do I want to see? What type of life do I want to have lived? What do I want to be able to say about that life here in this later years? Who's with me? Who do I want to have by my side? Where do I want to be? So you kind of look at that, because what that does is it anchors you in values. It starts kind of helping you bubble up to the surface what values are really important. And then you can take that into a shorter period, coming back into your current self. You look forward a year from now, and what is going to matter most? And it puts things into a different perspective, because oftentimes looking with a meta view or looking more long-term, then different things become important that in the immediate time we don't, think are that important, or we place much more importance on than they really matter. So taking that step back, giving yourself some spaciousness, and then looking at what values come up from that exploration. So that way you kind of are starting the year with this Northern Star and with looking at what's fulfilling, what's going to be important. And then you can plan out, that time and be more intentional in your mindset and in your choices that you make in the present.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think there was I may be quoting this wrong, but there was a study that came out looking at what made people happy when it came to money and how much of it you should have to be quote unquote happy. And the study showed that if you were making 75,000 a year, you basically reached the apex of happiness if happiness was tied to money. And anything beyond that would not necessarily make you happier. So that goes to show that it's really a balance, right? A lot of the things that you mentioned about being grounded and being mindful and not judging. And you really have to kind of be really basically analyze yourself, for lack of a better term, and understand what things change based on actions that you take and how they make you feel and what lessons you can learn to be a happier person, a more productive person. Is there anything else that you've noticed that at least maybe for you worked better once you made that mindset shift into saying, I'm going to maybe tweak something or change something that worked well for you, or maybe some of the clients that you had?
Yeah. And, speaking of with, clients, another way to help you work towards those goals of a happier 2021 and, the vision and fulfillment is working with a coach, because sometimes it's hard to find the answers in ourselves. And for me, working with a coach was really instrumental in helping me learn more about what kinds of questions to ask myself, how to explore within myself in a more productive way, starting with, so many people know about values, and values are important. But once you really start to kind of write down what those values are, why those matter, then that can help a lot. And so, being supported is really important. So I found that to be true for me. Being supported by my family is saying, this is what I want to do. Will you hold me accountable to it? And so having those conversations, that dialogue, and making sure those connections are strong. You think about accountability. If you were to say, okay, I'm going to become more healthy and I'm going to go running at 6 a.m. every day. If you don't do it and you don't tell anyone, who cares? It's not going to matter. But if you tell your next door neighbor, okay, every day at 6 o'clock, you're going to see me running past your house. That morning when you wake up at 5 and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it. Then you're going to be thinking, oh, that neighbor is going to call me out on it. And if I don't do it, I better show up and go for that run. So having an accountability partner, that makes a big difference, whether it's a friend, family member, a coach, or all of the above. That's made a big difference for me. And other things that I've noticed just in my relationship, being at home more, we've had to do a lot of kind of redesigning of things and, changing of routines. And I've had to be more aware of myself. I tend to have, that kind of stickler and pleaser side. So I was still going above and beyond working, but also doing the meals for everyone and, doing a lot of the maintenance and the, extra logistical things. And then my husband, he's here. Before he'd be at work and he'd be gone all day and he couldn't do that stuff. But now he was here. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm now making dinner. This is the third meal that I've made today. And you're sitting doing your thing. It's like, there's something that's not working, about this, because now you're here and you can do it. So I was realizing too, because of my pleaser, I was just like, okay, fine, I'll do it. If he wanted to do it, he would say it. But since he's not saying it, then, I'll just do it. A pleaser goes above and beyond in doing things for others and doesn't always respect their boundaries. So the first thing I did was I was like, well, I'm not respecting my boundaries. And I noticed that because I'm feeling frustrated. So where are my boundaries? I had to figure that out within myself of, what is important to me? How do I want things to be? And once I had clarity on that, then I was able to talk to him in, again, a very open and positive way. So there was no like, when are you going to start pulling your weight around here? And when are you going to start doing stuff? And why aren't you helping me? Like, you get nowhere with that. So it was like, hey, this is what I'm noticing about the situation. This is what I'm noticing within myself. How can we make some changes where our needs are met and it feels like there's a little bit more equality here, a bit more balance? And so he has a controller, saboteur kind of side to him. And he's like, well, don't worry. If it gets too much for you, then I'll just, take care of it. And I'll do, what you need me to do. And I'm like, well, no, that's not what I want either. So we had this whole conversation where he quieted that controller saboteur. I quieted my pleaser saboteur. And we came together in a really nice balance that's worked for several months now, where we take turns. We both help with breakfast. I do lunch one day and then he does dinner that day. And then the next day, then we switch. So then I'll do lunch and he'll do dinner for the family. And there are days when I'm like, oh, I've got this meeting. It's my turn to do lunch. Can I do dinner instead? And so, there's flexibility, but it's really designing with oneself what's important, respecting boundaries by first knowing what they are, and then communicating with the other person in a very open, curious, grounded, positive way that's going to bring much more positive results.
Yeah, very key skills to any relationship, I think. And I'm smiling throughout this because I've had similar conversations with my wife too. And even last night, she was working on writing a grant, and she was frustrated that she couldn't think of what direction she wanted to take her summary. I walk into the room and she's immediately starts talking to me about it, and I could see that she's frustrated. And there isn't really much I can do to help. And I'm trying to jump in the shower. But anyway, long story short, she's like, you're not helping me. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? What do you need me to do? She's like, I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, so it turned out that all she wanted was bounce the ideas with someone else. So going back to your point of sometimes getting a coach or talking to someone who can help, you just need someone to listen to you and direct you to the right door to open, and then you get to step into that door by yourself and figure it out by yourself. But you just needed that guide.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, Lisha, I know we're short on time, but are there any final words or any final word that you wanna share?
Well, I would say, as you go into 2021, really consider, how do you want to show up in 2021 as far as like your peak performance and your happiness and your relationships, and get really clear on that. That clarity is so important, because then whatever comes next, you have that anchored in. This is why it's important. This is why it matters, rather than just doing things that feel important in the moment. So having that time to really carefully consider and set yourself up for what you really want this year is going to help ensure that success, that happiness, and that fulfillment for an even better year, and set the foundation for more better years to come. Well said.
Now, if people want to get in touch with you or contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So my website is coachlisha.com. It's LISHA. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at coach_Lisha. And I have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/coachlisha. In addition, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Love from Lisha, for an extra dose of love in your day. And I have almost 100 episodes on there on my Coach Lisha YouTube channel. So I invite people to check that out. For those that are listening, then as an extension of appreciation, I'm happy to offer a complimentary success boosting session. So you can reach out to me on my website and schedule that. And if you let me know in the notes that you heard this podcast and you heard about me through it, then I'll throw in an extra special bonus for you.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll put that in the show notes, of course, so people can check out your website and your YouTube channel, which I enjoyed looking at. You have a lot of videos, and I like that they're in small bits and snippets that people can quickly watch them and move on with their day. So that's great.
Thank you.
Well, Lisha, any final words before we sign off?
I want to thank you so much for having me as a guest on your podcast. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and to, hopefully bring value to the listeners. So I love helping people to, get to their goals. I've had my challenges with, navigating all of these, different kind of saboteurs, the perfectionist, hyperachiever, the pleaser. And so I feel really strongly about helping others in their journeys. And I appreciate opportunities to share.
Great. My pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
That was my interview with Lisha. I hope you can take some of these tips and apply them in your personal life. Listen, I am ambitious myself, and I believe that if you want to be successful, you need to figure out what you want, set goals, and go after those goals. But I would highly recommend that you do things in moderation. When you pursue success, you are going to inevitably trade your time and your physical presence with the promise of that success that you're after, especially in those early years. As you do that, it's very easy to lose sight of the things that are equally as important in life. I'm talking about your friends, your family, building relationships, and just having a balanced life and living your life. It's not healthy for you to just zero in on achievements and forget about everything else. You need to unplug, you need to relax and live a little. So I hope you take the tips that we shared in this episode and reassess your priorities in a way that allows you to do both, excel at work and shine at living your life. You can find the show notes for this episode on my website at umarjang.com/session34. That's session 34. By the way, if you have been listening to the show but you haven't subscribed yet or you haven't rated it, I'd ask you to take a brief moment to subscribe, rate the show, and share it with someone that you believe would enjoy listening to it. That would really mean a lot to me and to the show. Thank you for spending part of your day with me today, and thank you for listening. Until next time, please stay safe and motivated. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Motivational Voice Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate it on iTunes. Get show notes and the latest blog posts at omarjang.com.